Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast, a show designed for brand new sales reps working in the world of tech sales. I'm your host, Neil Buyan, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey on the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast. Did you know that you can watch this show live with the guests on YouTube? This show is available on YouTube at happyselling.io. So hello listeners and watchers, welcome to another show of the SDR DiscoCall podcast. I'm your host Neil Buyan, and today, as always, I'm excited. We've got a great guest on board, and this is somebody, as per normal, I connected with on LinkedIn. We got the talking and we thought, why don't we get him on the show? So just a reminder, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this through YouTube or through podcast, please make sure that you rate and subscribe and share so we can help more SDRs out there. So I'd love to introduce somebody that I recently met with a few weeks back, Mike Judge from Turtle. Mike, how are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Good to be here. So as you say, met with Neil via LinkedIn really, and started a bit of a conversation. So good to be here. And so I live in Southend-on-Sea in Essex, and I'm currently a senior SDR at Turtle. So Turtle is a enterprise content automation platform, and we help businesses to create, distribute and personalize content assets. And we're helping businesses move away from sort of static content assets such as the PDF. So I've been working at Turtle for nearly 2 years now, really enjoying it, and liking the sort of SaaS world and technology world as well. So happy to be talking to you, Neil.
Thank you so much for a great introduction, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show as well, Mike. So obviously working out in the world of SaaS at Turtle, UK SDR and a senior SDR at that. And again, we've been talking for some time, so I'm really glad to get you on the show. So again, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see me sharing my screen. And what I love to do is kind of like give a bit of context as to, like what I saw on LinkedIn, to give a bit of a story as to who Mike is. So Mike, looking at your LinkedIn profile, if we go way back before the world of SaaS and sales development, what we can see here is you had worked previously in the world of finance, you've worked in insurance, you've also been a recruiter yourself, student ambassador, you've worked at companies such as Amazon, you're a member at Rev Genius, and like you say, you've been for the last year or so, you've been working in the world of sales development at Turtle. So Mike, I'd really like to know, like in your own words and for the listeners and watchers out there, like could you walk us through your story of kind of like how did you get here today?
Yeah, of course. So I was born in 1994. No, I'm joking. Previously wanted to go into finance. Like I say, used to really enjoy maths at school. Thought that was an avenue that I was going to go down. I'd done my work experience in year 10 at an accountant's, which was, it was enjoyable. But after 2 weeks of doing it, I knew that it really wasn't for me. So after that, I'd always had a bit of a passion for sales. I was one of the kids at school that you probably used to buy like a Lucozade or a Mars bar off. That was me. So I was always into sales, probably fancied myself as a bit of gift of the gab. Not really too sure. But after that was really went into sort of like telesales, like cold calling, inbound and outbound at Insure and Go. That was when I was doing my A levels. So when I was at sixth form and then college, and then after that went to university at Brighton, studied business management, which I guess kind of like encompassed elements of sales within that as well. And then in my placement year, ended up at Hayes Recruitment, so large recruitment firm as well, and focused on like the technology sector. So I think that's kind of like where my interest in technology began.
Got you.
So I was there for about 13 months in my placement year. Enjoyed recruitment. Thought that was maybe an area that I was going to go into when I finished university. Went back to university, finished my studies, which went really well. Managed to come out with a first, which was pretty good.
Well done.
I wasn't too sure I was going to get that in my second and first year, to be honest with you, but managed it. So that was good. And then after university, I was really just trying to sort of find the right role. Thought about going back to Hayes, back into recruitment, and then I found sort of a good opportunity at Amazon. So I was working at Amazon in business development for about, again, just under 2 years.
Yeah.
So I was working on the marketplace side in the UK and was really working with marketplace sellers and businesses to help them onboard onto marketplace and ramp up their sales and just really sort of make the most of their selling experience on Amazon. Worked there for, as I say, nearly 2 years. It was an enjoyable experience. It was, as you know, massive company,
Yeah.
lots of opportunity. Obviously, in big companies as well, you know, there's always an element as well where like the impact that you can make potentially maybe isn't as great as you may want it to be. So
Mm.
after that, I kind of decided, you know, maybe it was best to leave. Took a bit of time out. Didn't really know what I was going to do. I was thinking about going back into recruitment, and then managed to pass my driving test probably about 5 or 6 years too late than I should have done, but better late than never.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then really just sort of like came across, you know, I was interviewing at a lot of places, trying to be quite careful and selective. You know, I didn't sort of rush into anything. And then I found a job ad at Turtle, which, to be honest, it was one of the best job ads like I'd ever seen. I still think to this day, like it was just really like it just really like hooked me. So
Okay.
after I saw that, as soon as I saw that and I applied, I knew that I wanted the job. And I think the way that I kind of secured that really was prospecting through LinkedIn. I mean, Josh, my manager, he, you know, he mentioned that he was hiring on his LinkedIn name. So naturally sort of like sent him a DM on LinkedIn, sort of cut the
Nice.
queue of all the applications. And then we had a really good few conversations. And then that's kind of how I got where I am today. So
That's a
in
pretty
terms of the role that I'm at.
That's a pretty cool story, dude. So, like, being that guy was, you know, from Lucozades salesman in the playground, going through different, you know, like industries, different roles, kind of like finding your feet to kind of ending up in Turtle. And there's kind of a couple of points in there. So, again, with a lot of the guests that we've had on, like initially we may have this idea of this is kind of like the field we want to get into, i.e., like finance, and then we kind of come to the conclusion that maybe this isn't for us. And then I heard a lot of things like different roles that have kind of, you know, helped you out to become like an SDR that you are today. So like, you know, like doing cold calling, working in with recruitment. So for you, like in your mindset, like again, a lot of SDRs that listen into this, they may be pondering like job changes or career changes. What was going through your mind about, okay, this isn't a fit for me, but maybe I want to go explore there? What was going through your mind at the time? And are there any tips that you might give out to somebody that's kind of going through the same thing, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think really, I always knew that I'd probably end up in sales, but I mean, obviously, sales is a lot of different roles in a lot of different industries. You know, like recruitment, obviously SaaS, and really, I think that I was just always quite curious to see what else was out there. I know there's so many different sales jobs and so many different industries in which you can do it, and all the styles in which you do it is very different. I mean, you know, recruitment obviously is changing, but there's kind of that perception of recruitment as being quite like you know, hard stoned, you know, like 100 calls a day, like 8 till 7 o'clock. And I just kind of thought that, you know, I mean, as interesting as that sounded to me, I mean, maybe I wanted to explore a bit more what was out there. And obviously with recruiting into technology and just knowing that that was a really fast growing industry, I thought I'd check out, you know, the world of SaaS and computer software. And was just really like just speaking to different people, and just LinkedIn was a massive help as well. I mean, as you know,
Yeah.
just connecting with people on that and just sort of following people's journeys and seeing how they got to where they are, listening to sort of different podcasts as well. But really just curiosity, I think, is the main takeaway from, I think, how I ended up here is just, you know, just trying to find out more and just really trying to get to a place where you're in the right place. I mean, it took a while, I think, for me, but I feel like now I've got that.
I absolutely love it. And you know what, like for some of us, we may move faster than others in terms of career or kind of where we end up, but it's, you know, everybody has their own journey. And I love that, where, again, another great trait for an SDR is to be always curious, you know, like how do things work, or how is this going to be, and exploring that. So like hats off for doing that exploration. And like raising a few points, like recently I'm working with an SDR who was a recruiter herself, and now she's in this world of sales development. And like when we have our one-to-ones, the main thing that comes up again and again is like, this is a completely different world to what I'm used to, and I'm having to get out of this mindset of, you know, a full end-to-end sales cycle of finding a candidate, booking the next meeting, getting an interview, and then closing them with a client. With here, it's more, you know, trying to build out that relationship, sharing content, trying to speak to multiple stakeholders. It could be a couple of conversations before you even book in that
Yeah.
initial meeting. So yeah, like there are different sales positions, or, you know, qualities of sales that, you know, you can take from other jobs and put into here, but then you kind of got to find your feet when you go into that new role as well. And I think like we've had quite a few recruiters on this show, and they've been glad that they've made the transition. And I always ask them, would you ever go back to recruitment now that you've had a taste of SaaS sales?
Mm. So I wouldn't rule it out, to be fair. It's, you know, it's obviously it's a massive industry, right? People are always looking for jobs, and it's never gonna not be there. And it's obviously a very lucrative role if you get it right. And there's always the element as well. One of the main reasons why I got into sales is I like speaking to people, and recruitment does give you that. So I wouldn't rule it out, but probably, you know, not in the next like 5-10 years. I don't imagine, but I definitely wouldn't rule it out, because, you know, it's something that I have got a bit of experience in, and I think it's something that, you know, I could enjoy at the right company and the right sort of timing. So potentially.
Love it, love it. And you know, like again, could be a bunch of recruiters right now that are thinking about getting into this role. And I think it's always interesting to know, like, from the skills that you learn in recruitment, or, you know, in the other companies that you've worked for, have there been any sort of transferable skills, like, you know, techniques that you learned there that you kind of still use today, Mike, in your SDR role?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's sort of worked in recruitment sort of knows that, you know, you need quite thick skin. So that's definitely something that helps. And also as well, you know, just being quite relentless with the outreach as well. I mean, you know, you're calling people that are at work probably all day. You know, you're probably going to spend a bit of time after your work day as well calling them. But I think like being a bit relentless, but also as well is, you know, building relationships with people that last for a long time, because it might not be the right role for them at the right time, but
Yeah.
it might be a different one in the future. And I think a lot of this is transferable to, you know, computer software and being an SDR as well, because as you mentioned, some of the cycles that you can go through, I mean, not even talking about signing a deal, even booking a meeting can take months, even a year. I mean, I booked one recently with a lady who I spoke to first in June 2020, and I booked a meeting with her. When was that? I think it was on Tuesday. So just goes to show, you know, just keeping on top of it and just making sure that you hopefully build that rapport, and also as well, make sure you update your CRM and keep a task as well.
100%. My old sales manager used to say, like, if it's not in Salesforce or the CRM, it doesn't exist. And it's always good to have that audit trail. And that kind of brings me on to another point. Like, recently been having a conversation with somebody about, you know, targets and activities, etc. And kind of what I'm trying to do and coach this person is to, you know, not only just strive to hit their target, but also like be consistent with their activity. And I was a bit challenged on this, and I love to be challenged, right? And I said to the person, it's all cool to hit your target, but if your activity is low, that could also cause you a problem in the future. And they were like, well, if I've hit the target, then I don't really have to worry about the activity. And I said, okay, cool. But imagine if you didn't hit the target for this month and you didn't have the activity, you know, you're kind of selling yourself short. And I said, like, what you also want to be thinking about is the future. So like an AE or a salesperson or a recruiter, you always got to have that pipeline. And that activity is done at a set standard point per day. And if you do it over time, then it's always going to build your pipeline for the next month, the month after, the month after. Because yes, you've had a great month, but as we know, we're now into Q3. So we're like, what, coming into July. It always starts with 0 on the first day of the month, and you've got to
Yep.
start again. But if you have to kind of build up your prospecting again from scratch, you're going to, you know, struggle to, you know, be consistent. So my kind of tip is like, make sure that, yes, you're cool for your target, but make sure you have that activity to back you up. But what are your thoughts on it in terms of like activities versus targets? Like, what's important to you, and like, how do you, you know, stay consistent?
Yeah, I mean it's a great topic for sure. I think there's it's kind of like that old school sales mentality as well, where you need to do X number of calls per day, you need to do X number of emails per day, which I do believe to an extent for sure. Like obviously you need to be making activity, and you need to be like doing LinkedIn nowadays as well. I mean obviously like you need to be multi-channel. It's not just your calls, it's not just your
Mm.
emails, it's LinkedIn, it's text, it's sharing content. It's not just trying to book a meeting as well. It's building relationships and being relevant. But yeah, I think that ultimately I do try and keep to some level of like consistency with the activity that I do.
Mm.
However, like for me personally, I think that it's about having like awareness as well of like who are the right people to call at the right time, like making sure that you've taken a note of if you've spoken to someone but it wasn't the right time, like leaving good notes about what you spoke about, why it wasn't the right time, making sure you've got
Mm.
the task to follow up as well. And then I mean a lot of my meetings now are just coming through sort of like follow-ups from people that I've spoken to about a year ago that weren't ready. So but obviously that all came from activity, right? So
Mm.
it's really important, and I think it's definitely good to have like a level that you try and aspire to or hit on a weekly basis. A daily basis, I think, it can be a bit, it can be difficult, right? Because you might be doing planning, you might be doing maybe more LinkedIn focused, but I think on a weekly basis, you should definitely have like a level that you aspire to.
Mm.
And really, we sort of aim for about like 200 calls a week. So it's not like ridiculous amounts, but it's
Yeah.
good enough to keep the consistency, but also have enough time to sort of think about and slow down like who you're calling, why you're calling
Mm.
them, what you're going to say. Same with emails as well. So I think there's a balance to strike, and finding that probably isn't always that easy.
Indeed. But I love it, like you said, like being consistent with it, but taking a mindful approach. So it's not just like spray and pray and just doing the activity for the sake of the activity, but taking your time and thinking about, okay, so how you're going to execute. And I love like how you say, like some days it may not go to plan. You may have other new things in your calendar, like like planning, or perhaps having one-to-ones with your team,
For a
or perhaps
podcast.
thinking about a new sequence that you want to create or something, right?
Mm,
And yeah, like again, like with the activities, like I always say, like to SEOs, I don't expect like 500 calls like a week, etc., or
mm,
just doing it for the sake of it. Like with me, it's about the quality that comes off the back of it. So like if you're doing like 100 emails, like what's the reply rate to it? Like what's the conversion to that becoming a meeting? And again, it's something I chime in again and again on all the shows that I do. Like with the calls, it's called, like I used to do like 120 dials a day, 2 hours call time. I did it because I had to do it, and it was what the old school sales manager told me I had to do.
sure.
But the reality was, even though I used to book 40, 50 meetings a month, like in my early days of telesales, there was a very low conversion rate on those actually
Mm,
becoming opportunities and deals. But it was, taking a qualitative approach where, all right, I can do 100 dials, but if they're all lasting a minute long, probably not having meaningful conversations, right? But if I have 10, 20 solid calls a day where they're averaging between 3 to 5 minutes, I'm actually probably having a conversation with people.
mm,
And then I think, and equally, like, taking time to reflect as to how, okay, what was successful in the day and what didn't work? What
yeah.
could I change up to make it better for the next day? And taking that time to reflect as well. Solid points, 100% with you, mate. And the other piece, like with your career, so like you said, you're working with an Amazon, and you said something really interesting here about the impact that you make is kind of like a bit harder to see, perhaps within, say, a smaller startup. And I think, like for me, I used to work in the world of corporate sales.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd book meetings, but I would never hear about the deal closing or the new logos that we've acquired, etc. And I wouldn't know what my direct impact was. So for you, what did it mean, like, not being able to see that impact, and how does it like differ working in a startup environment for you, Mike?
Yeah, I think that, having the sort of transparency across the board of like, to a degree, of what's going on, how things are going. On my first day at Turtle, I met with the CEO, Nick, which, you're not going to get that in a lot of companies. I mean, obviously when I joined, we were not early days, they've been around for about 4 years. We were about 50, 52, 53 people. We've nearly doubled since then in the last sort of about 20 months. But
Wow.
I think that, I mean, it's hard to say because within a big organization like Amazon as well, it's kind of like a startup in its own right, in its way that it's going into many different verticals and industries and got so many different business units. So it was
Mm.
almost like I was working in a startup as well.
Yeah.
It was a very, very, very big startup. But I
Love it.
think, I think the obviously with Turtle as well. I mean, I kind of found a place where you can you can find out a bit more about like like revenue targets, and find out a bit more about like what the intentions of like your leaders are, and you get a bit more face time with them, which I think is valuable.
Mm.
Not to say that certain people don't get that in certain organizations. It's probably just maybe an experience that personally I had. So
Yeah, 100% with you, dude. And I agree with you. Like, a lot of guests have said that, like, when moving from like a corporate world into a startup world, getting that face time with the leadership, seeing how like they structure and build a company and how they're hiring. And as it's growing, like you see employee number 50, employee number 65 coming along, and you kind of feel like you're part of something special versus a company that's already been defined and people know like who they are as well. And everybody experiences it in different ways. I think like back to my time when I joined on board in companies where I've been employee number 52, then I've been employee number 98, and most recently at the company that I'm working with at the moment, we're not even at the 100 mark, but I'm employee 90 something. And I went to our first ever sales kickoff. And funny enough, this was the first sales kickoff I've attended since January 2020. So I felt a bit fresh, and I was like, oh, I've missed this, like seeing a whole team company, but seeing like how they've grown, like how many people they've added to it, kind of like what's like the projections for the next year. We're hiring more people. And for some people, it can be really unsettling. For others, it can be really exciting. But again, to that point of feeling like you're part of something, I think is a key thing that I found, and a lot of the SDR guests have said that when they've joined into these startups as well. And with Turtle, so obviously there are elements that really remind me of my days of working at Showpad in terms of content with PDFs and like helping like people have these better conversations through the tool. Who are the type of people that you normally speak to on a day-to-day basis when you're trying to introduce Turtle, Mike?
yeah, so the genesis sort of began in marketing. So naturally, like VPs of marketing, demand generation marketers, account-based marketers, really sort of moving into the sales space as well. So, well, moved into the sales space. So sales enablement leaders as well, VPs of sales, and channel and partner marketing as well. They're kind of like the core personas that we sort of target. But I mean, really, it's a content format that can be utilized throughout any part of the business. So we can really be speaking to like heads of talent acquisition for like recruitment packs, or we can be speaking to internal communications who want to sort of create more engaging content for their employees and sort of see, is it performing? Are they actually reading this? And the interactive elements as well can sort of help you tailor and personalize future content to, perform even better. So it's a range, but primarily sort of like marketing and sales.
Yeah.
But I'm sure like as time goes on, we're going to be moving into lots of different sort of personas as well.
Indeed. And you know what? Like, again, similar to companies that I've worked with, and even more recently, like with my current job that I'm in, we're working with like employee communications, like director of comms, IC managers, etc. And yeah, I've been in places where we've sold to VPs of sales and VPs of marketing. Sales enablement is a very like close to my heart topic, especially like with happy selling and training, etc.
Sure.
Um, but what's really cool by the sounds of it, Mike, is you're talking to different departments, you're talking to different roles, you're talking to different personas. You must get like a really mixed bag of cool knowledge that you're learning from like, how these companies are doing what they're doing and how they execute their strategies. Has there been anything like, like an aha moment, like when you've been speaking to like a marketing team to see their strategy or working with sales? What cool things have you learned which kind of helps you out in your sales role?
So, well, one thing I learned is not all VPs of sales like being called. But apart from that, definitely. I mean, I think it's testament as well to like when I was onboarded, like Josh and the marketing team as well and leadership team, like they've got a really good grounding of like enablement documents that we use that sort of talks to the personas that we're talking to. So, sort of talks to the personas that we're targeting.
Yeah.
Apologies. But yeah. So I think that, yeah, I mean, generally I'm prospecting into computer software technology companies, and it's mainly, mainly large enterprises. So they can be quite fragmented. They're not really too sure how content's being used in different parts of the business. There's not too much alignment as well. But I think as well, there's in some businesses as well, there's always that like curiosity to sort of try new things and tools. And so I think that to take away, I think some businesses, they're using a lot of platforms, and I'm not sure if they're using them as well as they potentially could be. There's a lot of tech out there right now, and I think a lot of businesses are going down that consolidation phase at the moment as well, where they've got so much tech they don't know what to do with it, which as a tech salesperson can be quite difficult. So I think that it's very mixed and very varied depending on the companies, but at the end of the day, everyone's got the same goal to some extent, which is to sort of grow the respective companies they're working on and make sure that they're seeing what's out there and being like with an ear to the market and just like making sure that they're not falling behind.
100%, dude, 100%. And you're right. Like, I remember my days at like Shope had very similar thing to like with Turtle with content and enablement. I remember speaking to a lot of VPs of sales or VPs of marketing, and I'd say like, you've got this PowerPoint presentation that's initially created by marketing to enable the salespeople to, sell the message and the vision of what the company's doing. And I used to say to them, like, do you know if this content's being used? Do you know if it's being shared by your salespeople? They were like, yeah, we think they are. And I was like, you think? Like, how do you 100% know? And then I said, well, look, me being a sales guy, I used to take like my PowerPoints and I used to like rip them apart with what marketing did, put in my own logos, put in my own text. And I said, like, how do you guys ensure that you've got version control? So for the listeners out there, in terms of I create a PowerPoint and I want it to be the version that goes out, but somebody else could unlock that PDF or, that PowerPoint, and they're then mutilating it, is the way that I used to put it to marketers.
Yeah.
And they're taking your lovely content and they're completely destroying it and creating their own version. And with salespeople, like with VPs of sales, we're like saying, so do you know what your team are doing out in the field? Do you know how they're interacting with their prospects? They're like, yeah, we catch up like once a week. They tell me what's going on. And I said, but past that, what do you know? Like, we don't have that insight. And again, to your point, they'd be saying we've got multiple tools. We've got like Dropbox, we've got Google Drive, we've got all of this. And I said, well, how do you know what's living in there and how effective it is, like, to help you guys sell? And they'd be like, we don't. And then you'd show them a new way of doing something. They're like, right, so we can do this, we can do this. And when they have that light bulb moment, that used to bring me joy of like saying, right, we can help you as salespeople, we can help you as marketeers. But I'd always like ask VPs of sales and marketing. I said, look, do you know what? One day I want to run my own business. And the reason I'm in this job is because I want to see how VPs of marketing market and spread awareness and content. And how do VPs of sales like work and how do they run their teams? But you said like an interesting point there, like some VPs of sales, they don't like to be called. So how do you like lock horns with a VP of sales? Have you got any tips like if you're going to try and connect with a VP of sales?
I mean, generally I think generally they're probably one of the more favorable people to call, but occasionally, like in anything, you do get that anomaly where they don't like being called, or how did you get my phone number or whatnot. But I generally just try and pose a question, like, you work in sales, you must have called people at some point, or where did you get my number from? Oh, I use this plugin. I'm sure your sales team use it. It can vary how that sort of goes down with a different person, depending on, I guess, like what day it is and what's been going on in their day, I guess. But I think that, you've always got to be understanding and just don't take it to heart, really, is the key. But I love speaking to VPs of sales as well, because it's kind of like it's like that opportunity to probably learn from someone, hopefully, who's got a bit more experience than me and can probably teach me something on the call as well.
100%. I really love that. And I love that technique, like you said, like kind of bringing it back to like common ground. Like, you've been in this position, you've had to call people, this is how I found numbers, your team might be doing this as well. I think that's a really nice way to build rapport with somebody. But again, it could depend on how much of a good day they've had, a bad day, and you might get a nasty like feedback on the phone. But to your point, like, try not to take it to heart. But I love that element of, trying to learn from something that you might be able to take from that call that can help you out in your career. I remember, again, my time at Showpad, I went up to, where was it? I think it was Teesside, and I met, it was a manufacturing company, and I went to go introduce the platform and do the whole AE thing. And I remember I was doing the demo, I was doing like the recap, and I was talking about the next steps. And the VP of sales was sitting next to me in a boardroom. And all these other sales guys, they got their arms like this, like, who the hell is this guy? He's like some new age techie salesperson, because they worked in the world of traditional manufacturing. So it was completely like mind blowing for them. But I remember the VP of sales just like midway through the meeting, like he said, "All right, gents, we're all going to take a break." And the sales guys walked out and he said, "No, Neil, stay here. I just want to chat with you." He's like, "The way that you ran this meeting and the way that you did the next steps and you explained everything, where did you learn this style from?" And I said, "Oh, I learned it from other salespeople. I've read books and stuff like that." And he just said, "There's a book that you should read." And he was talking about like spin selling. And spin selling is something I learned way back in the day.
Yeah.
But he was like telling me like certain chapters that I should be reading and what I should be doing. And he just said, "Look, I'm really impressed in the way that you act as a salesman, like salesman to salesman. I like it, and let's kind of stay in touch." Unfortunately, the deal never closed because I made a really bad boy error of trying to like bring him across the line when he wasn't ready to do it, and he got offended. I remember he said to me, he said, "Neil, like, look, I respect you as a salesperson, but that technique that you use to try and get me onto a deal with like a carrot in front of me, I don't like that. So we're not going to move forward on that basis." And I learned a big lesson. And I still speak to him every now and then, like to ask advice. But, you know, trying to learn from other people that not only you're trying to sell to, you know, what you can take for yourself as a sales professional. And obviously, like before we got onto this call, like we're talking about careers and, you know, aspirations, etc., like kind of where you want to go. And I've seen like on your LinkedIn profile, it says like you are an SDR, you was working in the enterprise space, and then you become a senior SDR. And this is something I'm seeing like with a lot of other LinkedIn profiles. And to me, when I never used the term senior, I was an SDR, then I just went to AE, then I went into the next role.
Yeah.
And I've been asked questions like, "Neil, what are your thoughts on like making some of our current members into senior SDRs?" And I kind of said back to the person, I was like, "What does senior SDR mean? Is it somebody that's been in the role, you know, for a longer time, and they maybe have got a core focus in that role, or is it because their target's gone up and, you know, it's a bit harder to hit and it's kind of getting them prepped to become an AE?" For you, what does senior SDR mean at Turtle, Mike?
Yeah, so I'm sure, as you say, it can probably mean different things in different companies, and it does seem to be a bit of a new phenomenon in a way in the world of computer software. But yeah, I mean, at Turtle, what it means here really is I'm still prospecting in the enterprise space, still booking meetings, still doing calls, still emailing, utilizing, you know, LinkedIn. But really, it's kind of working with the leadership team a bit more to sort of, you know, think about new tools, processes, messaging, and working with new joiners as well to help them on board, going through sort of, you know, like role plays, ramping them up, listening to calls, giving feedback. So it's a bit of element of like coaching and training. It's not like full-time management. I'm not like a team lead. I don't necessarily lead a specific team. But it's really, I guess, just being kind of like that go-to person, because, as you know, a company that's growing, you know, my head of sales development, Josh, he's very busy. He's getting pulled in many different directions, like a lot of people are. So it's good to, I think, have a go-to person or peoples or persons that you can sort of have that have got that knowledge or experience as a new sales development representative to go to and get feedback on, and just get a bit of, you know, how would you approach this? You know, I'm not, you know, it's not no one's opinion is necessarily right, but I think that if you can provide some valuable insights and just break down how you might approach it, then that may help. And that's kind of what I'm doing today. So that's what it means for me. But yeah, I'm looking at it as kind of like a stepping stone. You're right, to the next role, which will be an account executive in the next few months, hopefully.
Think it will be positive affirmation. It will be, Mike. But I love that because I think a lot of SDRs do ask me the question of like, what should I be doing before I take that next step? And I always ask them like, what is it that you want to be doing? And 9 times out of 10 is like they want to become an AE. And I try to remind them that being an AE is more than just doing a demo for 30 minutes to an hour. There's a lot of things that happen outside of that. So you're managing the relationship, you're handling objections, you've got threats, you've got competitors, you're talking to procurement, you're doing lots of different things. And you're having to perhaps re-educate people that you've been speaking to for the last year, but then introduce it and educate again for people that are new into that sales cycle. And something that I learned was, sometimes taking on more responsibility than what you're just tasked to do as an SDR. So, like, we're emailing, we're calling, we're prospecting. But as you mentioned, if the company's growing and you're able to help out newbies that are joining on board, like being that coach, giving feedback, perhaps you don't have it assigned to your quota or against your target, but you're there to help them up. But I think taking on that extra bit of responsibility gives you a bit of exposure just to, working with a team, working with multiple stakeholders, people that don't get it, from people that are failing, helping them bring back up. These are qualities, again, that you can transfer that will, aid you to become that great account executive. So I think, like, for the listeners and watchers out there, if you're thinking like, what could I do? Like, perhaps speak with your boss and just say, are there any other responsibilities I can take on before I transition into that AE role that will, help you become a well-rounded individual and salesperson. So I love what you're doing. And yes, I will be watching intently over the next few months for that promotion that will happen, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, by the time this is published, I'd like that to be the case.
Indeedy. And what we could do is get you back as a future guest to see, like, how did that transition pan out and what are the ins and outs, like, to give tips for the future guests. I'm always planting the seed. I'm putting my pipeline in there for the podcast show.
Of course, yeah, like any good seller would.
Indeedy. So again, it's been absolutely great to get you on the show as well, Mike. And I said, would love to get you back on. And a question that I always want to ask our guests is, so here's a little bit of a twist. I normally ask, what would be the 3 bits of advice that you would give to your former self? And we most recently had a guest on that said, what 3 bits of advice would they give to their future self? If that Mike in the future is the, hey, what 3 bits of advice would you give him? So it's totally down to you. Which way do you want to go? Do you want to give the 3 bits of advice to your younger self or 3 bits of advice to your future self?
I think I'll for the listening audience, I'll probably go down the latter route. So the younger self, I think, just because I'm sure. I mean, but I'm sure there's a lot of cross bridges in that, and I'm sure they intertwine. So I think that, I mean, we've mentioned it and we've touched on it a lot. It's like curiosity. You need to be curious. How are people doing things? Why are they doing it? When are they doing it? How long for are they doing it? And just really trying to get to the yes or the no. So just being curious and trying to learn. That's probably the first one. Consistency. We touched on that with activities as well. That's key. I mean, it's probably quite a simple one, but I mean, it can be quite easy to peak and trough. But I think on a weekly basis, you need to make sure that you're doing X to get to Y. So that's probably one as well.
Yeah.
And one that probably could be future and past is, like any salesperson would, if you want to work in sales, I think, you need to develop like a passion for people and for conversation, and really try and like build rapport with people and work on skills like effective listening and elements like that. So that's probably the 3 key takeaways I'd probably give.
Absolutely love it. Thank you so much for that. So again, stay curious, like always explore, be consistent, like you said, in order to hit X to reach Y. And again, like with like learning and continuously doing this, like improving yourself and having that passion to love what you do, right? So future Mike, if you're re-listening to this, remember the advice that the younger Mike gave to yourself. So yeah, in essence, we actually just did that. We've given our future Mike just some advice as well to remember. But absolutely love it, Mike. And are there any shout outs that you'd like to give on today's show?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few. So probably stick down the sort of, I guess, business development route as well. I mean, I've got there's a couple of tutors at university who helped me quite a lot as well. So cool. I'll probably shout out to them as well. So Keith, if you're watching, nice one. Julie as well, you're a star. And I think as well, like obviously in a company like that, like it's been really good. So I mean, Josh has really helped me progress. Carla in the marketing team as well, she's been really good to work with. And James is like the main account executive I work with as well. I've been learning from him over the last couple of years as well, and he's really been helping me. So I think that, shout out to all those guys for really trying to help me develop and just being approachable when I've needed them.
Absolutely love it. So shout out to the tutors and shouts out to the team. So Mike Judge, SDR, well, senior SDR from Turtle, I wish you all the best luck in the coming months, and fingers crossed for that promotion that will happen. And if any of the listeners or watchers want to reach out to you via LinkedIn, are you okay with that?
Yeah, of course. On LinkedIn, Michael Judge. Find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So listeners and watchers, I'll make sure I put that into the notes as well. And remember, we want to get this show out to help as many and inspire as many SDRs as we are out there today. So again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please rate us in your local podcast platform. But Mr. Judge, thank you so much. I wish you a great week and a great weekend. We've got the England game tomorrow as well, so fingers crossed that we get through. Yeah. You never know, stranger things have happened. But dude, most thank you again, and happy selling.
If we're watching it in the future, let's hope it came home.
Indeed, 100%. But Mike, have a beautiful week, sir, and happy selling.
Thanks, Neil. Been a pleasure. Great to speak to you again.
Thank you so much for listening to our show today. If you work in tech sales and have a career or story that you'd love to share, then please email us at podcast@happyselling.io and we'll be in contact to book in a show.